Sorry, it's been a bit complicated to get in, everybody. Thanks for coming along. First item on the agenda is substitutes nominated for the meeting. Do we have any particular substitutes nominated?
No, there's been no substitutes, and
Right.
no apologies, Chair.
Sorry, I've got apologies from Councillor Scullion. She's only happened at the last minute, which is why I've not been able to appoint a sub.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Members' interest. Remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to the items included on this agenda, either now or as and when the items come up. Any interest to declare at this point? No? Okay. Minutes of the last meeting held on 3rd of February 2020. Do we have any corrections or modifications to that? No?
No, I'm happy to propose them as a correct record, Chair.
Okay, would somebody like to second that?
Seconded.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so we're all in favour of that, accepting those minutes? Yes. They will be duly signed as and when appropriate. I'm not sure how we do that on Zoom, but there we go. The first substantive item on the agenda is risk management. It's a written report which you will have received. Who is presenting this one? Sorry, who's?
I will introduce it, Chair, and then Mark Cole and his team will speak to it and provide a presentation, if that is okay.
Okay, yes, please fire away.
Okay. The report brought to you today asks members of the committee to consider in greater detail the strategic risk of failure to deliver regeneration, including business and housing. A key part of the Council's vision is the continuing regeneration of Calderdale by developing the growth of businesses across the authority, delivering local affordable housing. Failure to continue to deliver this regeneration would see the migration of businesses and people out of Calderdale and fewer businesses migrating in. The COVID-19 pandemic and the consequent lockdown has impacted heavily on businesses across the UK. And now, however, there's the risk of localised lockdowns, which will continue to affect businesses and continue to affect people if there are significant numbers and increases in the number of people infected. The lead officer for the risk is Mark Cole, who's the Interim Director of Regeneration Strategy, and is in attendance at this meeting along with Sharon Rogers and Mark Dowson to provide members with more information with regards to the risk and how the impacts of COVID are being managed. We'll answer any questions that members may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Would you colleagues like to go on with it?
Mark, you're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. We have a presentation to give, Chair, if you're happy with that. The presentation is in two parts. The first is effectively the work that the Directorate has been doing pre-COVID-19 to manage this risk. Then obviously I will go on and talk about what we'll be doing post-COVID-19, if that's okay.
Yes, fine. Carry on, please.
Super. In that case, I will ask Sian to share the presentation and I'll talk through it.
I've just tried to share the screen, but I think the host has disabled screen sharing. So could I think either Janet or Tilly enable that for me?
Are we able to do that?
Yes, we are able to do that, Chair.
Thank you.
Is it done? Thanks, Tilly. Yeah. Okay, let's have a go. If you could kind of just confirm you can see this, that'd be really helpful.
I can see
the screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm just going to put it in read view. So tell me if it changes because I don't want to lose it. It's just so that you can see it at a big, decent size.
Yep, that's changed for me.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll try and be Mark's able assistant and go through this as he's speaking.
Thank you for that, Sian, and thank you for bearing with me, Chair. So I just wanted to start the presentation by reminding members that effectively the work in this area is driven by the Vision 2020 2024 document, which was published in 2018, which essentially sets out the three key challenges which the borough is facing: that of a productivity gap compared with other parts of the country, poverty suffered by various parts, geographic areas within the borough, and some of the low skills issues which effectively affects Calderdale. This document also basically sets out the 6 big ideas which drives the work of the directorate in this area, and that's growth and investment, social value, access to good work, young people and lifelong learning, people and places, together with the need to target our efforts with partners to ensure that we're making the most of the resources at our disposal. And in the next few slides, I will outline where we have been targeting this work. So firstly, there's the growth service, and that's a key element of effectively addressing both the challenges facing the borough and picking up on the 6 big ideas contained within the Vision 2024 document. And the growth service essentially is a West Yorkshire growth service, which is delivered by effectively the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and focuses on providing support to SMEs, pre-startup and startup businesses, support for innovation to get new products and services to market, help with exporting through the DIT, help with finding businesses and premises, and accessing loans and equity funding for businesses to grow their support. As I've already mentioned, this is effectively done through the Growth Hub in Leeds, but we also have several officers within the Borough Council actively delivering this at a local level as well. Effectively, that is supported by an additional strand of work, which is around employment and skills. And here we have an employment hub, which is specifically aimed at supporting 15 to 25-year-olds, including those benefiting from apprenticeships. We also have an Inspire programme, which is aiming to assist people furthest from the employment market. And in other key elements include working with skills providers like Calderdale College, and working with Job Centre Plus and DWP on redundancy support. And obviously more of that in a bit. The next slide essentially shows the work that we're doing on the visitor economy. And obviously members will know better than I how important this particular sector is to the local economy. And here work has been focusing on filming, culture and events to position Calderdale as a key visitor destination, both regionally, nationally, internationally. And effectively working at a sub-regional level to increase longer visitor stays, because as you will be aware, a key trigger for spend per head in tourism is effectively for those visitors who actually stay overnight rather than day trippers, although they are important too. And we've also been working closely with the hospitality trade to improve skills. Moving on, and I suppose this is work which is come to fruition quite recently, is that effectively the Calderdale has bid for and been successful on a number of key recent government initiatives. The first of that was the High Street Heritage Action Fund, which will hopefully benefit Salisbury Bridge. Then we have effectively 2 bids for future High Street funds, one for Halifax and one for Elland. And indeed the Townsdeal Fund, which will hopefully benefit Tobbington and Brighouse. And again, this is probably one of the most successful parts of the country in terms of seeking this level of funding. We've also recently appointed a new dedicated town centre regeneration programme manager, and that will effectively significantly aid our efforts to support the sustainable future for the key towns within the borough. And obviously that will be a key part of the post-COVID-19 recovery plan that I will talk about later. And obviously other areas where we're working on is working with the public and private sector on looking at how we continue to encourage investment going forward. But moving on, we're also focusing on improving social value. And here, will be an important part of addressing the risk which was described at the outset, because effectively it'll be a way in which hopefully we will be able to use procurement processes, particularly for public sector key projects, to directly support efforts to support local businesses, skill and upskilling local people, and effectively looking at how we can identify best practice and shared learning with other anchor organisations to drive the Calderdale economy. Moving on again, so moving on to housing, and again we've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort over the last years and months to develop a pipeline of housing projects, again very much working with our key partners to effectively, as I say, we've got a £90 million pipeline currently, which is very much the key driver. And we're also working on the local plan, which will effectively identify and hopefully allocate a number of key sites to facilitate future housing within the borough going forward. And again, we're also got a partnership with Together Housing Investment Partnership, which is looking to deliver 650 new homes in the next 5 years. And again, at the bottom of that slide, I also identify a number of schemes which are currently on site with regards to housing schemes. Moving on, we've also got Weave Homes, which was incorporated just over a year ago now. And effectively that has the twin aims of increasing the supply of new homes across the borough, but also to generate a financial return to the council. And again, has an ambition to deliver 200 new homes using a £4 million loan from the council. And again, work is well advanced on the first scheme to be delivered by Weave Homes in the borough. Moving on again, and this is where, if you like, the presentation in two parts focuses on COVID-19. And a lot of the work that I've already mentioned was effectively well underway and ongoing pre-March. But obviously in March of this year, we were faced with COVID-19 pandemic. And effectively, this slide is just really to give an illustration of the scale of the economic impact that the pandemic will have in terms of the economy and potentially the housing market as well. And as you can see from the third bullet there, we're talking about significant impacts on the international as well as the national and regional economy. Next slide, please. So, and this is effectively the last slide I'm going to talk to now, but effectively Calderdale post COVID-19 is well on the way with effectively producing and delivering a three-phase recovery process. The first phase, which is currently ongoing and initially was looking to run through to October of this year, although with the current upturn in cases locally, that way will extend beyond October 2020. But obviously that is very much in terms of a fluid situation as it currently stands. But a key driver of that first stabilise phase to the recovery process is very much to deal with the immediate response to the ongoing COVID challenges. It's very much led by public health colleagues, and it's about ensuring that we're both able to deal with the immediate impacts of the pandemic, but also how we can actually safely open up the economy and effectively get back to developing a new normal for Calderdale. And as it says in the slide, at the moment we're very much focused on local test, trace and contain, but also very focused on how we develop a number of key themes, which are around safe places, safe workspaces, safe transport, safe communities, and safe care, as well as safe education. And basically, next slide, please. What I'm going to do now is really focus on the safer workspaces element of this, because this is very much about where we're seeking to ensure that we can effectively reopen the economy as it's safe to do so. Obviously, over the last week or so, that's effectively changed again. But what we have done since the COVID-19 pandemic has been very much about establishing a recovery task group, and that is co-chaired by the Chamber of Commerce. And we've been very focused, and a lot of time and energy has been working with local businesses and advising them how to reopen safely in line with government guidelines. We've also been effectively focused on delivering significant business grant support to particularly those small businesses that have been directly affected by not only the COVID-19 pandemic, but immediately prior to that, the flooding which Calderdale experienced. And effectively what we have done, and I think the figures are there, is using government grants, we have distributed effectively around about £5.7 million by the end of July. And we are confident that we're around 5,387 local businesses will receive support from effectively the COVID-19 support grants for small business.
Sorry, Mark, could I just put in there, did you say 5.7 million? It seems to say 57.7 million.
Sorry, the actual figures on the slide are correct. It should say 7.7 million. Thank you for raising that, Councillor, because I wouldn't want to give a false impression. It is 57.7 million.
Thank you.
And we're also now, together with colleagues at the Combined Authority, developing a range of support to help businesses review their resilience and recovery plans. We're also working on consultancy support to help tourism and culture sector and wider sectors who've been suffered the greatest impact from COVID-19. And we are also, as well as supporting the small business community and key sectors that have been impacted, developing a longer term economic recovery plan. So the Combined Authority are developing a West Yorkshire economic recovery plan. And there is a group which is leading on that, which includes the leader of the council. And in parallel with that, we are also working on a Calderdale inclusive recovery plan. And that will effectively aim to look at how the actual borough best is able to recover from the COVID-19, and will cover a wider range than just economic in terms of the plan. Now that plan is due to be complete by the end of the year, and the work that's actually focused in delivering that plan is that we are currently working on a COVID-19 impact assessment for Calderdale, which will draw on work commissioned by the Combined Authority, but also be drawing up the local impacts of the pandemic, particularly, although not exclusively, on the local economy. The first results of that impact assessment were reported to the Calderdale Recovery Coordination Board a couple of weeks ago, and we're hoping that that work will be complete or largely complete by the end of August. That will then be used as the basis of wider community consultation with both residents and the business sector about what a Calderdale new normal should look like. And that consultation process and engagement process will take place in the autumn. both the impact assessment and the results of that engagement with both the residents and business community will form the basis of a Calderdale inclusive recovery plan, which I think I've already mentioned will be complete by the end of this calendar year. That will then be launched early in 2021 and will form the basis of efforts at both a local and sub-regional level to drive the recovery of the local economy in Calderdale. That's all I wanted to say in terms of an overall presentation, Chair, but I'm happy to take questions.
Indeed, thank you. Very comprehensive, very detailed, and we will do well to remember the detail and question accordingly. But over to the group. Anybody has a particular question to ask on what Mark has been saying? Or are we all stunned to silence by the detail? And
hello, Chair. I was waving my hand. That's Councillor Lee.
Sorry, with the Councillor Lee, with the slides up, I can't see everybody. So please fire away.
Should I stop screen sharing? Would that be helpful, Chair?
Yeah,
I
please,
think so.
Okay.
Thank
that's
you,
better. Yeah,
everybody.
good stuff.
Right. Well,
Councillor Lee.
very interesting. I recognise that a lot of effort is going into this, but I know that one of the things that members are being asked to confirm this evening is our assurance that the actions in place are sufficient to manage the risks. And I'm not sure, and you're not sure, I don't think anybody can be sure that they are. And so we need to question whatever decision we're going to make later. But for example, and politics apart here, we're talking about a recovery and we're talking about audit processes and trying to do the very best that we can for the borough. All of us want to do that. Right now, we've had a petition given to us about parking. Various people have spoken about parking charges at the scrutiny board and at the cabinet meetings, and we've gone ahead with increasing car parking charges in some of the town centres. We need footfall everywhere to engage with the public, get footfall in our towns. And simultaneously with putting all this money in, doing all this great work that you've outlined, we're doing things that are absolutely fundamentally bad for business there. The other thing that we're doing is, as a council, we're presently having a lot of people still working from home until the end of the year, at least. And I don't have any difficulties with that. It's been a very sensible thing to do. But we need to get people back into the town again, increasing the footfall and making these various towns more buoyant and more able to recover. These businesses, despite the large amounts of money and the grants that some of them have been able to get, are still in a desperate situation. And I think we can't do enough to get them back to work. But what we can do is think again on some of the ridiculous inhibitors that were put in the place of business recovering with things that we could do something about. So comments on that, please.
Over to you, Mark, or whoever wishes to respond.
I'm happy to comment. Unfortunately, I can't comment on parking because that's not an area of my responsibility. So, Chair, so that would have to be a comment made by my fellow directors. I think the issue about being unable to predict and accurately assess the risk, I think we live in unprecedented times. I think effectively, even the people with far bigger brains than mine, the economists, are still looking at various different recovery scenarios, everything from a V-shaped recovery, which suggests that the economy rebounds quite quickly from the effects of the pandemic through to a U-shaped recovery, which basically would mean that effectively the economic impact was effectively longer lasting than the V-shaped, through to a W-shaped recovery, which is impacted by one or more future waves of the pandemic. So I think there is no consistent national or international view about the future impact and recovery process from this pandemic out there currently. And obviously a lot will depend on the future impact in terms of the health impact of COVID-19 going forward. So it is really difficult to, if you like, predict both how long and how severe and how long it will take for the economy of not only this particular borough or this nation, or indeed internationally. All I can assure this committee is that effectively the steps that need to be put in place to both clearly understand what the impact of COVID-19 will be on Calderdale, that work is underway. What we actually will mean by getting back to normal looks like, because I think there is some discussion both nationally and internationally of what this new normal post-COVID-19 will look like, and therefore hence this focus on detailed engagement with both residents and the business community of what the new normal might look like in a Calderdale sense, before seeking to develop a comprehensive, inclusive recovery plan, which seeks to build on a greater understanding of both the short, medium and long-term impacts of COVID-19, together what it is we're trying to go back to in or recover to in terms of what a new normal will look like. The only other comment I wanted to make, Chair, was in terms of town centres. It's obvious that COVID-19 appears to be accelerating some of the issues that we're facing town centres, not just in Calderdale, but effectively across the UK and further afield, which is, if you like, changing consumer habits around retailing. And there is undoubtedly a need, and this is where I think some of the money which effectively this area has bid for will come into play, which actually starting to develop what ideas of what our town centre's role will be in what appears to be a world where fewer and fewer people are shopping in person rather than online. And how do our town centres best adapt to those changing circumstances? And obviously COVID-19 has raised an additional pressure point over and above changing retail patterns, which is to what extent people that are currently working from home will return to the same levels of office working and factory working that they worked in previously. Again, there is some discussion, debate about what that looks like, and I don't think there's any certainty around that, but I think there will need to be a lot of work done on whatever these changes are. How does Calderdale's main towns respond effectively to those changing external pressures? And that's why I think it's important that we have got a dedicated town centre regeneration and renaissance programme manager whose full-time role will be to working with town boards to ensure that we are best placed both to rise to the challenges caused by COVID-19, but the opportunities as well, because there will be opportunities as well as challenges post-pandemic.
I think that's very relevant, and I think also particularly the aspect of the change to town centres in relation to shops possibly declining, office space in less demand. And I think part of the consultation process needs to be looking at how we perhaps modify our town centres, and in particular in relation to things like the local plan, where we're looking for additional accommodation across the borough. I've always had a hobby horse that we should be trying to get as much living accommodation within town centres, and I think possibly one of the positive elements of COVID may be that with some reduction in office accommodation and possibly even shops, there will be an opportunity to expand living accommodation within town centres, which will have all sorts of social benefits, and as well as making use of existing properties. And that is perhaps, certainly from my point of view, one of the things which should be considered in the consultation process. And picking up on Councillor Lee's comment in relation to the parking issues, we need to be careful that some of the steps we take don't contradict or go against some of the other objectives we're trying to put in place. Sorry, that's my little bit. Councillor Baker, you're indicating, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just think on that point, it's really just, it has to be embedded in some of the Cabinet reports and some of the thinking of Cabinet as to what the strategic risks are and what risks are particular priorities at any point in time, just to ensure that decisions aren't made that inadvertently have a negative impact on a risk somewhere when people elsewhere in the council as a large organisation actually working to mitigate that risk. And I think the parking charges is a prime example of that. How on the one hand we have a situation where government is requiring, encouraging people to go and eat out and doing those meal deals, and we have officers employed and town boards working on how you increase footfall. Then on the other hand, we're bringing in an additional charge which could have a negative impact on deterring people from parking in the evening and going out for a meal. So I think sometimes it's just about having that holistic approach and joined up thinking when other reports come to Cabinet, which the authors of those reports may not have always considered the strategic risk register of the council. So I'm not quite sure how you tackle that, other than perhaps just training officers who are writing reports to be mindful of the strategic risk register and what our corporate priorities are there in terms of mitigating risks.
Absolutely, and I think that coming on to, there was reference on a number of occasions to the consultation process and the importance involving people and officers alongside that, and I think that is a critical part of the we need some true consultation in terms of the residents, in terms of officers, of course, because they're going to have to make it happen, and also truly cross-party. I think we really do need to set something up which is really, really effective, that takes into account a wide spectrum of views and experience on this one, because it is so critical for the long-term aspects of Calderdale's regeneration. Any further comments anybody else wishes to make on this particular report? I have to switch screens and make sure nobody's indicating. I can't see anybody indicating. Am I correct? Sorry,
I'm
Councillor Lee.
indicating.
Yeah. Yes,
thank you.
Councillor Lee.
I think that there's another thing. I've not heard anything mentioned by Mark about this, but the two things that have been, well, three things have been killing the high street have been obviously competition from the internet, and that will be, a growing concern throughout the nation. But the other two are car parking and business rates. And we've heard about car parking. It just seems absolutely in opposition to what Mark is describing, all of these grandiose schemes, and then do something, as Councillor Baker said, absolutely diametrically opposed to what we're trying to achieve. So I agree that we need to get this strategic thinking sorted out, because we're pulling in different directions. Now, the other thing that is killing things is business rates. I've not heard anything said here, but it could be that more enlightened councils coming out of COVID-19 might be looking to help businesses further. I know that we've got fantastic money. We need every penny we can get, but business rates are a tax which are due whether they're doing any business or not. And this in itself is already killing the high street without the adverse effects of COVID-19. So I'd like to see more of that in your plans for recovery, Mark. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, noted. Anybody else wish to comment on this one? I'm also very aware that we've got a very extensive agenda here. I don't want to cut this conversation or comment at all, but we do have an extensive agenda. So I think those points have been made. If there are no further points to make on this particular issue, is there anything else that officers relating to this wish to say or add to it? Martin or Mark or Sean?
Thank you, Chair.
I assume silence means no.
Refer to Councillor Baker's comment about the cross-referencing of risks, and I refer to that in my later report as how we're going to do some work on the corporate risk register.
Okay, perhaps we'll pick that up later then. Thank you. Item 6 is actually the annual report, which I believe was to be presented by Councillor Baines. Have we heard anything else from Councillor Baines?
Councillor Baines is now in the meeting, Chair.
Excellent, good. Councillor Baines, would you like to take over the chair and also deal with your item 6 on the annual report?
Yeah, it's certainly. I mean, the report has been circulated. I think we've all had an opportunity to read through it. I remember what I said about that. I made some comments in there about the standard of my colleagues as members on the audit committee, and also our financial staff, including of course our internal audit, which are behind this. And all the officers who come and help audit. I think as far as I'm concerned, I think we do a good job as an audit committee, and we fulfil the requirements which are needed for us. And if we didn't, I'm sure Lisa would be banging my head against the wall or something for not doing so. Are there any issues or anything that anybody has in to make?
Nope.
Are we all okay, Pat? So I believe the next step is for this to be presented to full council at some stage, isn't it, at the next council meeting? So we'll go ahead with that. I've just been trying to work out where you were exactly actually on the agenda. You haven't got very far in the 45 minutes that I've been waiting to get in.
But my apologies for not seeing you, Stephen. It was the red shirt that confused me.
Yeah.
So we've done item 5. You've just done item 6, and now we're on to item 7, which is the Treasury Management Report.
Yes, Nigel, are you going to lead on this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of this is a standard report that comes to this committee, just explaining and summarising the Treasury management activity undertaken by the Council in the last financial year. The information that's presented in the report may actually answer some of the questions that were raised at Cabinet last night in terms of the capital monitoring report. So the highlights of the report really are that the Council borrowed £11 million in the last financial year from the PWLB at an average interest rate of just less than 1.9%. The report does bring out the fact that PWLB rates increased by 1% across the board in October last year. Unfortunately, most of the council's borrowing for the year was undertaken before that date, and so therefore at lower interest rates. But overall, even taking that into account, the average borrowing rate across the year was, as I say, just less than 1.9%. Appendix 3 to the report shows the maturity of our long-term debt, which at the end of the year was 113 million. As you can see, is actually spread over quite a long period, and what we try to do is spread that reasonably evenly across a long period of time, so that there's no one particular year when the council is having to make really substantial debt repayments. In terms of the investments of the council, you can see from the appendix that actually our short-term investments have not been realising huge yields to the council. generally less than 1%, and that's still the case. We generally invest in other local authorities, in financial institutions up to the levels that are being set by council. But you can see, as I say, most of those are less than 1%. The exception to that is highlighted within the report, where council did previously agree that the council would invest up to £5 million in CCLA, in their property fund. That was actually done in 2 tranches in the last financial year. The interest, the dividend earned on that £5 million in the last financial year was 132,000, but that was a part year effect. We're still earning a dividend of just about 4% per annum. So as you can see, that's actually significantly better than our short-term investments, which are generally less than 1%. The appendices also highlight where our short-term investments were at the year end. With that in mind, that was a summary, a very brief summary of the activity during the year. The report is really just for audit committee to note, unless there are any specific questions on it, which I'll try and answer.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Lee. Your sound's off. Switch your sound on.
Sorry, we're on. Just an observation really for Nigel. I think it was mentioned before that last night at the Cabinet we had a debate about capital projects and the amounts of debt that has been incurred in the past. And I'm not sure whether a conclusion was reached, but I did agree with that thread of discussion, which was asking for a more detailed breakdown of the borrowings against the individual projects instead of a block figure. So Nigel, I don't know if that was agreed last night, but I think certainly as a member of the Audit Committee, I would like to see that that information in greater detail, if that were possible.
Certainly we could break down the, perhaps not the borrowing outstanding at the moment, which obviously is linked to a vast number of projects over a very significant length of time, but we can pull out the main components of where the borrowing has been taken out by the council over the last few years and how much remains of that debt. And that's something I'm quite happy to build into either a future report to this committee or separately for circulation if that was preferable.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or observations? No. Well, I'd just like to say that when I first joined the Audit Committee, the Treasury Committee, the Treasury function was managed by, I think it was 4 employees, and I think we're down to 1 now, are we, Nigel?
Yes, there's one full-time person who does that, but there's a number of people who act as either backups when obviously that person's away. So that's where the resilience comes in, and there's a manager as well that has responsibility for that area that also knows the day-to-day dealings. So whilst it's a very low number in terms of the people who deal with that on a day-to-day basis, there is resilience in the structure that means that other people could step in to do that job, and also a manager to make sure that there is another person, at least one other person, plus myself, to oversee that treasury management activity as well, to make sure that there are appropriate controls in place. So as I say, despite the fact that actually it's a very low number of people involved, the controls, hopefully that Lisa will back me up on this, the controls are in place to ensure that everything is done in accordance with the requirements of council and the statutory requirements.
Yeah, I can confirm that.
Right, well, I think another fantastic job is done by this small team. So thank you very much for that. I think that's just to note the report, isn't it? So it's, I assume we're all happy with that. There's no dissensions. Yeah, thank you. So the next one is annual report on risk management.
Chair.
Yeah.
The risk report for today is to advise members on the work that's been carried out for the management of risk across the council for the last year and a bit now. The key message continues to be that risk management is everyone's responsibility, and this is reinforced through training and through the work of the corporate risk manager, particularly where they're working with project boards and other areas of the council. Obviously, the key impact last year was leaving the EU, but this has been moved into the background slightly while we're going the transition period. But this has been replaced, obviously, by the very real impacts of COVID that have occurred during the course of this year. And as part of the work that I've been carrying out, I've been involved in managing the risks of the delivering business continuity while we were in the lockdown period, and also closely involved in the recovery of services as lockdown is recovered. As part of the work that's been carried out this year for assurance, Zurich Municipal, our insurers, looked at 3 areas within the council. This was information governance, risk management, business continuity. And these were all found to be sound. There were 1 or 2 minor actions that needed to be carried out, and these will be brought to a future audit committee for members to see what they were and how we're dealing with the actions. For future work, it's proposed, obviously, one of the things I was saying, take Councillor Baker's point on board. COVID has changed the way that we work within the council. And one of the things we have to do, therefore, is to revisit all the risk registers that we have at the moment, whether it's directorate ones, strategic ones, project ones, partnership risk registers, and review them, how they've been impacted by the change in the way that we manage services, or by the way that the council delivers services. And also see where one of the things that we talk about is the crossover risk impacts caused by different parts of the service or services and their impacts on other areas within the council. So it is helpful that we were to pick up those areas which we need to consider, such as how parking is affecting regeneration. And then that will then be built into a complete risk register again, which will be reported back to the corporate leadership team and then to this committee at a future date. One of the things the committee needs to bear in mind is that we had a programme of looking at the risks, the strategic risks in the register. We've now reached the last 2 risks in the next 2 meetings. One of the things we were proposing is that members might like to receive the directorate risk registers presented by one of the directors to see exactly how those risks link into the strategic risk register. Risk management continues to be a key part of the Council's assurance and governance framework, informing and supporting the Council's annual government statement. We obviously will continue to manage risk closely during the course of the next year and continue to report to Audit Committee on a regular basis how the risks are being managed within the Council. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'll answer them. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Martin? Yes, Councillor Baker.
Thank you for that, Martin. Just when we're looking at the strategic risk register, I guess if we can just be mindful of local resilience forums, own community risk register, and the things that are on there. I mean, it's in, you know, when you look at that risk register, like pandemics worst, I think one of the #1 risks that had previously been identified, and you know, the pandemic we're facing at the moment shows you that was you know, accurate, wasn't it, in terms of it was a real risk, and now we've got it. But unfortunately, the risks of a pandemic flu haven't gone away just because we've had a coronavirus pandemic. So I think there is a particular need to focus on that whilst it's fresh in people's minds. And of course, we've got the risks of second waves come in as well. So I guess it's just that one thing. And then I think there's also been an increased risk within the pandemic in relation to procurement that has had to happen in a kind of emergency response situation. And I kind of think that there might be some issues around value for money for some of the things that we've done kind of quickly in response to it. And I think that might be something that we'll need to be mindful of in the future as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we will look at those issues. One of the things that actually has arisen, there's an article in Strategic Risk this week. In actual fact, now, due to the problems with securing procurement from abroad, 42% of companies now are looking to buy their stuff from within England to try and avoid some of the problems that were occurring during the course of the year earlier on, when we were buying PPE from wherever we could achieve it at the time. So yes, I should bear that in mind when I'm reviewing the register.
Right. Any other questions or observations? No. And so will you liaise with Lisa and get that report to us at some date in the future for a meeting?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Councillor Baines. Yes.
Thank you, Martin. So if everybody's finished that, we just have to note the report. So move on to item now, review of Code of Corporate Governance, which is a verbal report. Is that you, Lisa?
It is, Chair, yes.
Thank you.
This is a verbal report. Just to confirm that we've done the usual annual review of the local Code of Corporate Governance, just housekeeping changes such as change of responsible officers, etc. So as has previously been agreed, it's not necessary to bring the full report, but just to confirm verbally that review has been done.
Right. Are we okay with that? Are there any questions or observations anybody wants to make? So we'll follow the recommendations. We agree all those?
There are no recommendations, just to receive the report on the Code of Corporate Governance.
Yeah, just to receive the report and confirm the work carried out by the internal audit and take into account the findings from this report. So, did you want to speak?
Sorry, Chair, that was item 9, which was the review of the Code of Corporate Governance. Item 10 is the internal audit report and opinion. Right.
Okay, my apologies.
Okay. I am presenting this one, which is this is the main report for internal audit for the year, which summarises everything carried out by internal audit, prepared to assist the audit committee to carry out various functions, which receive and consider reports on internal audit effectiveness to support the annual governance statement, and to consider the effectiveness of internal controls, and to consider my opinion as head of audit. The report is in standard format and takes you through the various functions and various work which internal audit have carried out throughout the year. Section 5 of the report, sections that indicates a summary of the types of work which internal audit have worked on. It also includes a summary at, my screen's freezing. No, technology is against me. The report also includes a summary of the audit opinions concluded from internal audit work, which shows that improvements have been made as a result of internal audit reports. Those are the reports which internal audit report to audit committee at each meeting via the tracking report. The remainder of section 5 of the report indicates other work which internal audit are involved in over and above the issuing of internal audit reports which result in audit recommendations. I'm happy to expand on anything within that report. There is quite a lot of detail in there. It's everything that the team get involved in. Section 6 is about the review of the effectiveness of the system of internal control, and that's in place to manage risk to a reasonable level rather than eliminate risk altogether. And that review of the effectiveness of internal control is basically the work of internal audit. And as such, the team does contribute to the overall strength of internal controls. And as detailed in section 6, findings and opinions demonstrate that overall there are controls in place across the council. The rest of section 6 takes members through feedback received by internal audit, performance indicators which are best practice and in compliance with public sector internal audit standards. Section 6.6 does show the performance of the team for the year compared to last year. 6.7 does show that some changes were made to the performance measures in place, and that was to look at the qualitative aspects of audits. Again, this does show that we've got good standards in place, but as ever, looking to improve wherever we can through shared conversations and training, etc. So moving on to 6.13, it does talk about the internal audit charter. The review and refreshing of that has been put on hold due to the emergency, but it will be reported to the audit committee in 2021, as will the updated quality improvement programme, which is in place to identify where improvements need to be made by internal audit. They aren't significant things, but as I say, I believe that there's always room for improvement and to keep on top of standards, etc. So that future report will highlight that to members along with timescales. Section 7 is an important aspect of what internal audit does throughout the year, and it provides an independent check and assurance on Calderdale's activities, which helps to inform the annual governance statement. And that is partly the Code of Corporate Governance, which the item before talked about, but that section does detail other things which are in place across the council to gather that assurance and help to form a view, and the mechanism used is detailed in there, including assurance statements from corporate leads. And it's pleasing to show that in the majority of areas there are sound or strong arrangements in place, and that's an improvement from previous years. Where there were some areas for improvement, action plans are in place from corporate leads. So that leads on finally to my audit opinion, which comes from the previous sections 5, 6 and 7. And in conclusion, I won't read out what's in 8.2, but there are no concerns. There are 2 areas which I feel need to be included within the annual governance statement. That's the COVID-19 pandemic, and details there why that is. The controls were unaffected for 1920 in my view, and sufficient work could be done throughout the year to give that opinion. Some changes are proposed to internal audit work, which is on an item later on the agenda, to reflect the impacts, risks and change of priorities. And that will be kept under review and reported to the audit committee throughout the year. The second item, which my view is should be included in the annual governance statement once again, is project management. Members will recall this has been in the annual governance statement for since 2015-16. Initiatives have been introduced to address this weak area, and that has been reported to members. However, a more recent review has identified that there is a need to enhance governance arrangements further in that area, including clarity around procedures and guidance, etc. So there are no qualifications, in my opinion, for 1920. So the recommendations are detailed at the beginning of the report, and hopefully the report detail can allow members to agree those recommendations, but happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Lisa, I'm a great supporter of internal audit, as you know, and I think you do a fantastic job. On just a general point through the Chair, I find it very, very difficult when we're meeting by Zoom to keep up with all of the papers simultaneously with managing the Zoom. Other people may or may not be experiencing that, but there's a lot of things to take in here, and I find it difficult anyway. Lisa, I was going to ask, you know, of all of the great work that you're doing, there'll be some audits and some situations which are more satisfactory than others. And I was going to ask, you know, if you're picking one or two out of there, what would you be concerned about? But I think you've kind of done that, and I appreciate it. But the one that I am personally most interested in, that you've just mentioned, is project management. And I note that that process was started, I think, before I ever became a councillor. It's 2016. And the latest version of a review of this was down as being in February 2020. Now, in that 4 years, there've been a lot of projects and a lot of, we'll call it management, a lot of project management going on. So are we entirely happy that we've got a hold on this, because things shouldn't take 4 years to get right? And during that time, I'm aware that a number of things have gone wrong. So would you like to please comment on project management as one of your future tasks and perhaps priorities? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Your concern is exactly why I've suggested it is included in the annual governance statement once again, so that internal audit do keep that as a priority and review the arrangements that have been put in place to improve governance in that area. Some of the issues identified are similar to what have been identified in the past. The interim director who presented the item 5 has actually led on this development of a new model. So it is different, but it does have actually some of the elements that previous developments have had. So we will keep a close eye on that throughout the year. I will report back to members in due course as to how that review is going, and update members accordingly.
If I may just come back on that, Chair. Thank you, Lisa. An area of that I hope, well, I trust will be part of your work is looking at the contracts into which we enter on these projects. Where there are overspends, it would appear that the contracts that we've had in place have not been as robust as I would have liked them to be in a private business, or well, in a public business, in the private sector. And I would like to see just what sort of contracts we're entering into. You know, major overspends need to be dealt with contractually before the event, and not crisis management after the event. So I hope that we'll be looking at that. It seems to me we're making some fundamental errors in the contracts that we're entering into. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I can confirm that that will be looked at as part of the reviews of projects and contract management work which internal audit do.
Any other comments or observations? Tim, do you want to say something?
Yeah, Stephen, I mean, I think it would be better to have a bit of a presentation on the proposed changes to the project management thing, rather than get into a lengthy debate between myself and Councillor Lee on that one tonight, particularly. I mean, I think there are issues with some earlier contracts, but I mean, I think probably also worth noting that there's been some very protracted and robust arguments as well with various suppliers about them, some of which you'll be aware of course, and some of which are going on. I think the important point is that we ought to get a presentation and an update on the recommendations that Mark Cole is developing on a new project management process, because this is important. I think the context also is important, that the scale of what the council's doing in terms of project management has grown, and capital programme has grown considerably even since 2015 with the investment into infrastructure. But also part of this is also about making sure that major pieces of work are not just seen as capital programmes, but are identified as major project work as well. So I think it would be probably really helpful when Mark's completed his review to have that as a report on this agenda. The other item I want to make on the internal audit report generally, not specific to that item, but just to recognise and acknowledge that internal audit have done a lot of work in getting this agenda together and getting to here, but of course it's not been picked up earlier. During the COVID period, quite a lot of staff from internal audit, including Lisa herself and I, have been seconded onto doing other responsibilities, particularly supporting the business grants process as well. So I think it's commendable that you've got this agenda together and got these reports produced at the same time as I know you've made a significant contribution to some of the other urgent work that's had to be done. I think it's just important that we recognise that as well.
Yeah. At one point I'd make about on this particular subject is that previously we've agreed that once the settlements had been made for the two major contracts in the town centre, they would come back to audit committee for a review. And I would imagine that the Peace Hall and Library will be at that stage to come back in the near future to discuss that particular aspect of it, which might actually meet some of the things that Councillor Lee is looking for.
Yes, yeah, I think that's right, Chair. Yeah.
So are there any other comments or observations anybody would like to make? I'd just like to say on 5.7, the control environment for the audit opinions, very good, with no weak areas in it. So I think that's a compliment to the staff on what they're doing. Are we all okay with that? Right, so we'll move on to where are we now? It's 11, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, the annual governance statements. So who is presenting?
I think I'd take that if that's okay, Chair.
Yes.
I think I'll be very brief on this. In terms of there is a statutory requirement for audit committee to approve an annual governance statement to accompany the council's statement of accounts. In summary, it looks at the governance arrangements and the audit opinion on that. It describes the governance arrangements and comes to a conclusion that we can give an assurance that those arrangements are fit for purpose. There are two key items or two key risks that are brought out within the AGS, which you've just actually referred to, those being the arrangements, the governance arrangements in place in respect of both the lockdown and generally in respect to the pandemic, but also project management. So I won't go over those since you've just discussed them, but the recommendations are that the audit committee hopefully approve the 2019-20 annual governance statement, authorise the leader of the council and the chief exec to sign the AGS, and then to require a progress report on the significant issues raised in the AGS to a future meeting of this committee. So really that's what you've just been talking about in terms of requiring a report back to this committee about project management in particular, but the other issue obviously is the governance arrangements around COVID-19, that under this recommendation a progress report would be brought back to this committee to a future meeting.
Right. Are we all okay with that? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. It's just at the bottom of that, just in the paragraph immediately before the signatures are due to be signed there, about the conclusion of the review. I think that since at the top of the page, you'll see that this started in 2016-17, and here we are in 2020. We've got a new interim manager that's done, I understand, some very good work on that. I'm sure that he has. However, I think saying at the end of that ultimate paragraph, progress will be reviewed throughout 2021. I think that really we should be getting a finite conclusion to this. You know, I don't want it to carry on into a fourth and fifth year here. Let's get it right. So I think progress will be reviewed throughout 2021. Doesn't sound strong enough an ambition to me. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come back with that, Nigel?
I think if I say that, yes, the progress will be reviewed with a view to embedding it, the new project management arrangements. I think with anything of such significance, it will take some time to prove that those new arrangements are both in place and actually working properly. So that was really the point of saying that progress will be reviewed, because it isn't just a case of we will implement some new arrangements for project management. It's actually proving thereafter that those are actually working satisfactorily. But that's perhaps something that when we report back to Audit Committee on that progress during the course of the next few months, then you'll be able to take a view on whether that progress is satisfactory or not, or whether it needs to be escalated and increased. So it's not intended to say this will go on indefinitely. I share your views in terms of putting the arrangements in place as soon as possible, but in order to make sure that they are working properly, that will take some time and some monitoring. But as I say, I think it's something we're happy to report back to Audit Committee on, and committee will be able to take a view on whether that progress is satisfactory or not.
Right. So with that in mind, are we all okay to accept the recommendations? Is everybody in favour of that? Yes, I can see everybody in agreement. So thanks very much for that, Nigel. So we'll move on to item 12, the internal audit plan. Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll take this one. As members are aware, at the beginning of the year, internal audit do prepare an annual audit plan, which does set out the work we plan to carry out throughout the year. That was no different for this year. We did prepare the plan prior to the commencement of the year, but then planned for it to be presented to members. But given that the COVID-19 pandemic came upon us, we recognised the need to revise the audit approach to deliver the plan for the current financial year. This wasn't only due to the fact that, as already been referred to, internal audit resource was utilised to carry out additional functions this year in response to the emergency, but also to take account have been and will be introduced across the authority. So the report brings to you the normal report, how we would have planned to deliver the audit plan, but then also the revised approach to take account of changes moving forward, which we see across the authority. I won't go through the report in detail. It details why it's important to plan audit resources and how we identify which audits are of a priority. Just to point out, part of the report says any emerging issues from audit investigations and audit findings are used to identify areas which want further or wider consideration. that's actually the reason why the review was done, which has been presented to you later on in the agenda tonight at item 15. So it is assurance to members that we do pick up things from various sources of intelligence to over and above what we just programmed on the plan. So we have kept the audit plan under review throughout the emergency and reprioritised audits. This is being done in consultation with services and looking at where the council is changing. For example, school audits, we agreed not to go into schools until September at the very earliest. 4213 identifies the change of approach and how we're going to pick up risks from the COVID-19 emergency. This has been discussed with and endorsed by the corporate leadership team, who are fully on board with the approach that we are taking for the year. The audit plan is always flexible, but even more so this year. We will keep members informed of any audits which we don't conduct this year, but we will review them, keep on top of them in terms of priority. Any that aren't included this year will be done and considered for inclusion on next year's plan, but it does need to be flexible to reflect and respond to the changing risks. So I suspect that the revised plan will be very different. And in reality, what we will deliver will be different to what we set out to do. But it's important that we do keep up to date with risks and priorities of the council. So the recommendation is for members to agree the plan as it is and to agree the approach that we're taking moving forward.
Are there any questions or observations? Are we all happy to approve the plan then? I'm in favour, yeah, everybody in favour? Thank you. So we now move on to Ernst & Young. Who's doing that? Is it Richard? If you'd like to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll take the first one, our briefing. I won't belabour it, but just to quickly say this report is for your information, so it doesn't have any decisions attached to it. It was prepared for the audit committee that's subsequently been postponed, but we thought it was important that you still get access to it, even though times have moved on. There's only really two items I want to draw your attention to. I'm happy to take any questions after that. On page 6 of our report, there's reference to the SIP for Resilience Index, which is clear interest to you as an audit committee, as you are signing the accounts as a going concern and that the council is financially sustainable. That's a publicly available index that measures reserves and the council against other metropolitan councils, and is part of the information we use to give our value for money conclusion. And the second point on there is just around the audit reform. Clearly the dates and timetable in there have been overtaken by circumstances, but it's really just to reassure the committee that our audit is undertaken on a risk focus and to the quality standards required by auditing standards and the regulator, and we obviously give our opinion once we have the evidence to have met those standards. So they were the only two things I wanted to draw your attention to within that. As I say, it's for information, but happy to take any questions on the report.
Are there any questions? No, so we're okay with that. So we'll now go on to the good news. How much are we going to be charged?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take you through that. So we usually, this is a letter which is usually sent to you informing you what the fees will be for the upcoming year, so not the year that we're currently in terms of the year that we're currently auditing. We're not sending out those letters going forward. They will be coming directly from the PSA. As I understand it, you haven't yet had confirmation of the 2021 scale fee from the PSA, just to highlight that ourselves, together with other firms, are having discussions with the PSA about the sustainability of fees. So I expect that they'll be outlining the results of those going forwards. We've also had some correspondence with Nigel in terms of the current year fee, which is on the back of a letter which Janet Dawson, who's heads up our government and public sector cluster, has sent to audit chairs and chief finance officers in March of this year. That's all I've got to say in relation to audit fees. We're happy to take any questions which you might have. The other thing which I was going to do was just to update you on the impact of coronavirus on the work which we're currently doing on your 1920 financial statements. Our audit is currently in progress. But before I do that, if you've got any questions on fees, happy to take them.
Are there any questions at all? No,
No.
Are you okay to go ahead?
Okay, thank you. And so on in terms of update on, so in our plan, so our plan was presented before the impact of COVID-19 occurred. In terms of the financial statements, key areas which it is impacting are in relation to valuation of land and building. So RICS have issued guidance to their registered members in relation to the valuations which they undertake, and we're seeing valuers highlighting material uncertainties in respect of the valuations as at the 31st of March. So that's requiring us to undertake additional procedures to assess what that means for your financial statements. The other area of impact is in relation to investments, and particularly where that is arising is on pension funds. So pension funds have a number of, well, just by their very nature, they have material investments in areas which are subject to volatility. So we know that pension fund auditors are looking at investments of pension funds, particularly on some of the hard to value investments, such as private equity investments. So there are additional work which is being undertaken by pension fund auditors. So we've yet to receive the report of the pension fund auditor. As and when we receive that, if there are any additional areas which we need to look at, we will raise that with Nigel and his team. And the third one is, which touched on by Richard earlier on, just relates to going concern. So for public sector bodies, we're aware that there is a presumption of continuity of services. However, we still need to, under the standards, still need to look at the liquidity position of organisations. So that's an area which we're looking for additional assurance from Nigel and his team in relation to the cash position, and that the liquidity is of a sound nature, 12 months from our anticipated date of the audit report. And the other area which has been impacted by COVID-19 has been the timetable for the audit has been pushed back now in terms of the reporting deadline. So we need now to complete our audit by the end of November. So there's some of the key areas where COVID-19 has had an impact on our audit plan. Just wanted to bring those to your attention. Happy to answer any questions which you might have on those areas.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you for the report, Hassan. Just one query on it. You mentioned towards the end of it then that you were seeking additional assurances. And I was just interested that presumably there are ordinary assurances. There are more than that, which are additional assurances. Could you please clarify for the committee just what additional assurances are being sought
Sure. I think maybe just rather than assurances, the word I should have used would be like additional requests being made from of Nigel and his team, which we haven't done in previous years. So this year we're asking for stress testing of the cash flow position, 12 months from the date of our audit reports. That's looking forward to see that the council does have sufficient cash if to meet obligations in terms of potential outflows. That will very much build upon the treasury management function and reports which you've already received earlier on in the year. So we're looking to the treasury management team to be providing details of that cash position going forward.
Are there any other questions? So thank you very much, Hassan.
Thank you, Chair.
And we'll now move on to item 15 then. The selected report, business rates, refunds and cash transfers. Lisa, are you?
Lachlan McKinnon's going to present this, the audit manager chair.
Yes. Lachlan, are you ready?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a slightly different piece of work that we did than what's normally reported to members. It was an unplanned piece of work which came to our attention as a sort of risky area due to a couple of incidents that we became aware of. One was where somebody had paid the business rates using a stolen credit card, and they were refunded into a different account, and therefore they could obtain money fraudulently. It didn't actually cost the council anything, but they used the council as a means of using the stolen credit card. The other fraud that came to our attention was at another authority where a member of the business rates team had applied exemptions to accounts that had gone into liquidation, and that created a credit balance on the account and subsequently a refund that they paid into their own bank account. So we decided to have a look at what happens in Calderdale in terms of our controls, and also did some testing to make sure that similar incidents hadn't occurred in Calderdale. Members will be pleased to know that our testing did not identify any fraudulent actions, but there were control issues that we felt needed to be improved upon, and we did make 6 recommendations. And at the time of the follow-up, 3 of those have been implemented, and therefore the audit opinion remained as adequate. I'd be happy to answer any questions that members may have, and Nigel's obviously here and he's got overall responsibility for this area.
Are there any questions or observations? I think it's impressive that we do actually look at what happens with other councils as well to make sure that we keep on top of actions like this. So that was a good move. Thank you, Lachlan.
Yeah, we do have processes in place for keeping in touch with other councils of what's happening throughout the country. So we do use that information.
Good. So are we all okay with that? We'll note the report then. Everybody's happy, yeah? Okay. So we move on to item 16, the internal audit services tracking reports.
Thank you, Chair. This is the usual tracking report, which is presented to each meeting of the audit committee. Because we didn't meet at the end of last financial year, this does show all the audits for last financial year that hadn't been reported to members. plus the new audits which have now commenced in the current financial year. Just to highlight, there have been some minor delays experienced with regards to receiving responses to audit recommendations as a result of the emergency. And similarly, there have been some minor delays responding to queries when carrying out audits. Nothing significant, but we will keep the position under review, and any ongoing problems will be reported as appropriate. Just to point out, within the tracking report, we always report to members the number of occasions where we use RIPA. We haven't had any for a number of years, but the last inspection several years ago asked us to keep members informed of that, which we have been doing since that date. Just a recent update, we've recently been inspected once again a couple of weeks ago, and pleasing to report that there were no recommendations arising from that inspection this time. It was a remote inspection, and depending on the findings, they would have come under a full review, but there's nothing to report, no recommendations were made. So we'll continue reporting in that way and keeping our arrangements up to date as required. In terms of the tracking report itself, unless members have any suggestions for what they would like to see in terms of future member selected reports, my suggestion would be CCG recharges, which the audit opinion at the time of the audit was weak. The follow-up is currently ongoing, so by the time we next meet, that follow-up audit will be concluded, so we'll be able to report to members what the position is with regards to implementation of the recommendations. They were all accepted by management at the time, and I'm led to believe that good progress is being made, but happy to take any questions on that from members or any other suggestions.
Our members, are there any questions of Lisa? And are we happy to go for this report? I was thinking about the carers' allowances for children, which has gone from adequate to weak in the current test, but I'm quite happy to go with your recommendation, Lisa, and perhaps pick this up at another time.
That's fine. The next report will indicate again whether that has improved, because again the follow-up audit is ongoing with that one. So if there are any concerns, we'll certainly flag those up to members.
So are we all happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Move on to the Audit Committee work plan.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing much to say on this. This is the usual work plan. The only thing to highlight is we were planning to have a training event at the beginning or at the end of, well, no, the beginning of this financial year, at the beginning of April, for the Audit Committee to carry out a self-assessment. That was going to be through a facilitated training session. Would members like to do that session again in that way? Obviously, at the moment, it will be through either Teams or through Zoom, so that we can carry out that self-assessment, or would you like me to do it electronically using questionnaires, as we've done in the past?
What are members' thoughts on that? I personally think it would be better if we got facilitators prepared to do it, to seek their comments as well, but open to ideas from others. Yes, Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to say a very similar thing. I think it's useful if we get some facilitators, because we can get some feedback. It's more of an instant thing, isn't it, rather than presenting information and seeking it. So I'd be very happy with a facilitator-based format. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing that we're going to do with this as well is trying to encourage the members of the council to get involved in audit committee, because there seems to be a reluctance to come along to audit committee. I can never understand why, but there never has been that. There's nobody seems to be champing at the bit to get onto audit committee.
We did
So
get some
are we
new members attending training sessions last year, but nobody has as yet attended an audit committee. But we will keep trying. That is on the future plan of things to keep trying different alternatives and to target other whilst we're doing these training sessions.
Yeah. I just wonder if the group leaders would be happy to try and persuade some of their members to get it to come along and sort of find out about audit committee and what it's about. If you'd be happy with it.
I can give it a go, Chair, but if you've ever tried to persuade a Liberal of anything, you'll appreciate how hard that is. But let's see if we can get some along to get some along.
Yes, I have noticed that difficulty in the past. Tim, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I had a member asking earlier why the live streaming hadn't started. So clearly had somebody observing. So I'll try and build on that. Yeah.
Right. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree that with yourself and Ashley on this, and I'll encourage our Conservative members to get some more interest generated. They're a lot more amenable to suggestion than the Liberals. So yeah, the other suggestion I would have for Lisa here is that it's not just members. I think we should try to do some work among some of the senior officers, because I do genuinely believe that it's in their interest to have an interest in audit and to see what the work is and take a more positive view about it, because it's a good thing. And I'd like to see more interest, not just from the councillors, but from some of the officers as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, it hasn't happened recently, but when we've had a poor report from an internal audit, the senior officer concerned, we've actually brought them into the meeting to explain why. And I think actually, to be fair to certainly our senior officers, I think they're all fully aware of the aspects of the audit committee and the effect of the finance, our head of finance, Nigel, and our internal audit teams, who I think they are challenged from time to time at just about every level of management on financial issues. So to actually to drag them out to a meeting of audit, I think may not be the best use of their time in these times where, we have actually reduced the numbers of management as well, which again is another issue which we have to bear in mind. Yes, Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to point out in terms of the reporting timetable, it says that we'll report by the end of September. There's a possibility that depending on some of the areas which are outstanding, such as pensions, that the audit may not be complete by the end of September. The deadline is the end of November, but we'll keep Nigel informed in terms of progress and what an appropriate reporting date may be, and take it from there, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes. I assume that's okay with Nigel. Yeah. Okay. Are we all okay with that then? Right.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you all for your attendance this evening, and I apologise for the lateness in joining, but I can assure you it was totally out of my control.